All right, get this. Greece, land of sunshine, ancient history,
Yeah.
and the oldest cars in Europe.
Really?
Yeah, you wouldn't think a place, known for its beautiful islands would be chugging along with vehicles averaging 17 years old.
Wow.
We're diving into that head scratcher today, so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real economic puzzle, isn't it? And it all traces back to a policy that, on the surface, seems like it should be achieving the exact opposite.
That's what's so interesting to me, right? You'd think a country wouldn't want to be known for having old cars.
Right.
So they come up with this registration tax on imported used cars to discourage people from bringing in, all the old clunkers from other countries.
Yeah, essentially they were trying to prevent Greece from becoming a dumping ground for vehicles on their last legs, Noble goal, for sure.
Totally. But, and this is where it gets really wild, this tax seems to be a major contributor to the problem it was meant to solve.
Yeah.
How does that even happen?
Well, it all boils down to unintended consequences, right? You see, by making it prohibitively expensive to import used cars, the policy inadvertently created a captive market. With fewer used cars coming in, the demand for the existing ones skyrocketed.
Okay, so basic supply and demand. Got it. But how does that translate to Greeks driving around in cars, old enough to vote?
Well, because with used car prices going through the roof, suddenly it makes more economic sense to keep those older cars running, even if they require significant repairs.
Yeah.
Think about it. If replacing your 20-year-old car would cost you a small fortune, wouldn't you be more inclined to shell out the money for a new engine or transmission?
I mean, yeah, probably. Especially if getting a newer used car wasn't even an option.
Exactly.
So instead of refreshing the fleet with imports, the tax essentially incentivizes people to hold on to their older vehicles for longer.
Precisely. And that brings us right back to the oldest car fleet in Europe.
Okay. So the policy backfired. But could it have been predicted? Was there something inherently flawed in the logic? Or was it just a case of not anticipating how people would react?
That's the million-euro question, isn't it? On the surface, limiting the influx of older cars seems like a reasonable way to improve the overall quality of the fleet. But what it failed to account for was the knock-on effect on the domestic used car market and the incentives it created for people to hold on to their aging vehicles.
It's like they accidentally hit the rewind button on the Greek car market. But it's more than just the age of the cars, right? There's got to be a ripple effect in other areas too.
Absolutely. When you have a fleet that's largely composed of older vehicles, you inevitably run into issues with fuel efficiency, safety standards, and environmental impact. Older cars simply don't meet the same standards as newer models.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a potential environmental issue on top of the economic ones we've already discussed. This policy really snowballed, didn't it?
Indeed. And that brings us to the rather radical solution proposed by the blog we're diving into: abolishing the registration tax altogether.
Okay, now that's a bold move. But wouldn't that just open the floodgates for all those old cars they were trying to keep out in the first place? Back to square one.
That's the big question. And the blog acknowledges there would likely be some initial disruptions. Think about it. If a tax disappears overnight, there's a sudden surge in the import of more affordable used cars. This could lead to a temporary spike in traffic congestion as people upgrade their vehicles and potentially strain existing parking infrastructure.
It's like the car version of a gold rush.
Yeah.
Everyone's rushing in to take advantage of the new situation.
Yeah.
But what about the businesses involved? How would this impact car dealerships in Greece?
That's another layer to consider. For used car dealers who have been operating in a market with artificially inflated prices, this could be a tough adjustment. They'd need to adapt quickly to a new reality of lower prices and potentially thinner profit margins.
And on the flip side, you'd have new car dealerships probably sweating a bit, right? If people can suddenly afford decent used cars, why buy new?
Precisely. It's a classic case of disruption. But the blog argues that this shakeup, while potentially painful in the short term, could actually lead to some long-term benefits for everyone involved.
Okay, so short-term chaos, but with a potential pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah.
What are these long-term benefits we're talking about? So we've got this potential Carmageddon in the short term, but what's the long game here? What's the upside of this radical policy shift?
Well, imagine a Greece where instead of clinging to their old clunkers, people are cruising around in cars that are safer, more fuel efficient, and less prone to leaving them stranded on the side of the road.
Okay, yeah, that paints a much nicer picture than what we've got right now. Less pollution, fewer breakdowns, and maybe even fewer accidents with newer safety features. But how does that translate to, like, actual benefits for the average person in Greece?
Well, for starters, think about the money people would save on fuel and repairs.
Yeah.
Those savings could then be reinvested into the local economy, giving businesses a boost. Plus, with a newer fleet, Greece could potentially reduce its carbon footprint and contribute to a healthier environment overall.
Right.
It's a win-win situation in the long run.
All right, so we've got economic benefits, environmental benefits, and even societal benefits, right?
Yeah.
In terms of safety, and maybe even a little less road rage with fewer breakdowns to contend with.
Right.
But the blog we're looking at mainly focuses on the economics and the environment. Sort of glosses over that social impact angle, doesn't it?
It does, and I think that's a missed opportunity because when you really think about it, reliable transportation can be a game changer for people's lives.
Yeah, especially in a country like Greece, where public transportation might not be as widely available or reliable as in some other European countries.
Exactly. Access to reliable transportation can mean the difference between landing a job or missing out on an opportunity. It can impact access to healthcare, education, and even social events. These are all factors that contribute to an individual's overall well-being and their ability to participate fully in society.
So while the blog focuses on the big picture stuff like economics and the environment, this issue also trickles down to impact individual lives and opportunities.
Yeah.
That's a pretty profound realization.
It is, and it underscores the importance of looking beyond the surface when it comes to policy decisions. What seems like a straightforward solution can have far-reaching and often unintended consequences.
It's a good reminder that we're all part of a complex web of interconnected systems, and sometimes even the smallest tweak can have a ripple effect throughout the whole thing.
Precisely. And in this case, it's those ripples, both positive and negative, that could determine the future of Greece's car market and potentially its society as well.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to ponder. What seemed like a simple question about used car prices in Greece turned into a fascinating exploration of economics, environmental policy, and even social equity. It's amazing what you can uncover when you take a deep dive, isn't it?
It certainly is. And sometimes the most intriguing discoveries are the ones we least expect.
That's the beauty of a good deep dive. Thanks for joining me on this one. Until next time, keep exploring.